And so you do this. Right towards the end of the book, you go through this thing, and what it is that you describe happening with you is difficult because you find yourself retreating away from God in that process. You were leading a connect group, you asked Noah to start leading it. In fact, then you started leading it again, but not from a place of spiritual wholeness or health even, but almost kind of going through the motions while still having this debate, discussion, fight, whatever it is that we're going through with God. And it started having a very profound a negative effect on your spirituality, on your ability to love God, on your ability to want to listen to Him and follow Him. And you find yourself started having very destructive, negative thoughts, emotions, and temptations. What I find happens towards the end is that something happened, and maybe it was that incident when you were driving back home and you almost hit a herd of cows, but then you didn't. You could have died. People had dreams that you could have died, but something happened where the way that I understand it is you realize that trying to have a fight against God, trying to declare war on God, while it's something which has to be done and has to be contemplated and experienced, I think you began to realize that you're fighting against a force that is way, way bigger than you, far more powerful than you, and that the only person who's going to lose in that fight was only ever going to be you and Nompilo and other people connected to you. As far as I understand, that's the kind of place where you began to get to towards the end of the book. Not answers, not easy solutions, but you came to a place where you realize God is God. He's obviously much bigger than I am, far more powerful than I am, and I'm stuck inside this place called the world that He's made. And He has an idea about how it's supposed to function.
They don't understand why I'm here, you know? That's another thing. Sure.
So, my experience of the end of the book wasn't, like I said, answers. I think what I want to ask you right now, where are you in this journey? Because when you finish the book, I don't think that's the end of the road. You know, you ended it at a point where you were beginning to climb out.
Yeah.
Where are you now?
Yeah. I think I'm at a better stage. That's one thing for sure. I think just the way I've ended the book, for me, it's everything, man. You know, when you reach a point where you realize that He is all those things we were just talking about. After having questioned Him in all, then you realize, that whether I understand or I don't, one thing that I know is that He knows. So when He knows and you don't know, so the challenge again is when we try to know. It helps when you are still and you know that He knows. You don't know, but He knows.
He knows.
Yeah. So I was reading the book of Job, man. That book, I was frustrated when I read it because one thing that I was confused with is when you read the closing chapters of that book, it's like God was rebuking this guy. He's asking all these questions. Where were you when I created the world? And I'm like, hold on, God, you should be asking this, you should be rebuking these guys who are like saying all those things. And this guy's been through hard times, I think the least you could do is to ask him all these questions. But the interesting thing is that after God has asked him all these questions about the goats in the mountain, where were you when I did that? And then this guy reaches a realization of who God is.
Yes.
He doesn't get an answer, you see?
Yeah.
The problem is when we try to give an answer, this guy doesn't get an answer, but it's a realization that He is God. So that on its own will take you far,
Yeah.
That's something that will take you far.
But then again, that's a very different thing from what it is to be speaking about before. It isn't just, I believe in God, so what? It's about going through that process and coming out like that.
Yes. Like for an example, when you go, man, I really recommend people read about the worldviews. Like I've mentioned them already. When you are, the chapter talks about forgiving God. That you cannot do. You cannot forgive him. That's what I believe, you know. After having done all these things, angry at him, you reach a point where you're like, is it possible to be angry at him, you know? For me to be angry at him, it means he's able to be wrong. You know, he's a human being. He makes mistakes. If he doesn't make mistakes, then why am I wrong? You know, then people will be like, oh, I've married for these years, you know, and I pray, I do this, but we don't have children, you know. I'm angry at God, yet you're always at church on Sunday. That doesn't make sense, you know. You need to wrestle with those thoughts up until you reach a point, because you're just you're just hanging on the fence, and that's not a place where I would recommend people to be. Don't be there. Wrestle with this thing and choose sides. You can't, you know. So, for an example, there's a part where I wrote about this thing that you find that a couple is married, they're trying to have children, but they're unable.
Meanwhile,
then you find those kids who are fornicating and they have babies and they throw them all over, and you're like, where is logic here, you know? So again, it comes back to that, you know, it's just you saying, I don't know, but you know. And I'm not saying that I don't know because I don't know nothing.
Yes.
It's one thing to say, this chair is my God, I choose that, and don't question me. That's what I choose. You need to question it. Why you call it this chair your God, you know?
Yeah.
After questioning him and all that, you are left with that thing. That, not because I didn't want to try him, I was afraid. I wrestled with him, but one thing that I was left with was that
He is
all that.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, the only thing I want to close off with then is this. Like I said, I never knew him, and I don't know the kind of person he was becoming.
He was a great guy. Yeah?
He was a great guy.
He was going to be a great guy, trust me, like his father.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me I think that's all it is that I wanted to say or ask. Thank you for being vulnerable enough to talk to me.
It's awesome, bro. Thank you so much.
And thank you for writing this book,
That's
man.
awesome, man. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. It's fine.